Today we're going to do the second episode of Makeup and Shit Talk. Today we're talking about sci-fi as a genre. So, the first thing I would like to talk about is this guy. You probably heard of him. He's way more popular than I am because he's been doing it for way longer than I am. His name is Austin McConnell, and I just watched a video where he tried to convince his audience that the first ever sci-fi book ever released was done so by some guy in ancient Greece named Lucian. Here's the thing. Is that Austin McConnell clearly, from this video, Austin McConnell does not know what sci-fi even is. Because, you see, the thing is, sci-fi is about how future technology can come back to change the way we think of humanity. That's, what sci-fi is about. It's much more complicated than that, but that's a simple version. Sci-fi is mostly about how science, that's where it gets the name, how science can grow so exponentially that the term ethics and or the terms like humanity or what is God, but become irrelevant because technology is so advanced. That's the point. And this story is set in space by a technicality, but just because something is set in space does not mean it is a sci-fi. The difference between this story and, let's say, something like Star Wars is that Star Wars is actually sci-fi. Now, Kendall, you might be wondering, everyone says it's space fantasy. No, it isn't. It is not space fantasy. Because the whole point of any genre in the world has this thing where it has a common, really broad but common theme that all works tend to just copy. Because, at the end of the day, there's 30 different plots you can choose for your story. Everything is copied off of each other, especially sci-fi. Because, Star Wars was copied from A City of a Thousand Planets, and then, A City of a Thousand Planets was copying Doctor Who. Everyone copies off each other in sci-fi. But that's true for every genre. My problem lies because this book, written by this guy named Lucian, has nothing to do with the common theme of sci-fi. Because, and, you might be saying, Kendall, why is Star Wars not space fantasy, but it's actually just sci-fi? Because science fiction isn't about accurate science. It's never been. Nothing about science fiction had anything to do with science that was, in a textbook. That doesn't matter. What matters is the story and the themes. That's what makes a story. You can go through all of the trouble researching how space battles actually happen in space, but you completely miss the point about the genre. That's the problem. Because my cat is going crazy. So my point is that the reason why Star Wars I consider science fiction is because if you look at the themes of Star Wars, it's about how technology doesn't only win wars, but it can also destroy humanity. And not humanity as in the species, humanity as in a moral sense. Hey, Editing Kendall here. I just want to make clear that when I say it destroys humanity, it's similar to the idea of nuclear bombs, where the amount of destruction is so massive that the individual person does not matter on the cataclysmic scale of how destructive the weapon is, which kills the humanity within the bombers to a sense that it doesn't matter what life it takes. It just matters how much destruction it is. So the common person of humanity doesn't matter, and that's what I mean by that. That's a very common theme towards science fiction. And the thing is that, you can't just say, I hate the fact where everyone's oh, it wasn't well researched, so it's a space fantasy. No, that's not how science fiction works. And so, you might be wondering, Kendall, what is the first sci-fi book if it's not this random guy from Greece? Well, to answer that, we'll have to, it's a very simple answer and it's a very popular answer. It's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, why do I specifically think that is? Well, like, here's the thing. So, like, so the reason why it started out as sci-fi, it started the whole genre of sci-fi, is specifically because of its themes. Because when it released, it was simply a gothic horror. That's what it was, because they never had the idea of science fiction yet. The reason why it's considered the first ever now is because it set a massive precedent of science fiction in order to like be science fiction. So all of the rules that you have heard about science fiction, like it has to be related to science, it has to be hard sci-fi, it can't have fake science, blah blah blah, that's all wrong. I'm gonna tell you that right now. That is all wrong. Which palette should I use? I'm thinking purple today. Anyways, that's all wrong because they clearly didn't look at the first ever recorded science fiction. Because let's face it, like, no one, because think about it. When you do something new, you always call it something old. And then historians are like, oh, there's this new thing. And it started with this book. That's how we decided that Frankenstein was the first sci-fi, because it wasn't a term back then. But the reason it was the first sci-fi, it was massively popular and stood the test of time. Most genre-breaking stories that invent a new genre usually do this. Think Legends and Latte created the cozy fantasy. That is very similar. To what Frankenstein did. I'm not saying that Legends and Latte is a classic. I'll have to read it. But that's how it goes. Like, no one ever talks about, I don't know, like, you can't spell treason without T. They talk about Legends and Lattes, even though you can't spell treason without T, is very much, hold on, I'm going to turn this light on. Is that better? Is the lighting better? Is it worse? Probably. Anyways, so since there was no term for sci-fi, it was called a gothic horror. But like, how do I explain this? I'm just stuttering all the time. But the thing is, we have decided that that's the first science fiction because every science fiction book after that was like, technology might not be as moral as you think it is. That was kind of the idea that Shelley came up with. Now, Mary Shelley, she is my queen. I love her. She's amazing. One of my favorite books by one of my favorite people from history, by icon, lost her virginity on a gravestone, everything. She was just so cool. But the most important thing you have to learn about Frankenstein when you're like reading it for class or shit is that the story at the end of the day. But yeah, so seeing this guy, this random guy, he's not random, he's very popular, but this random ass guy, he posted this video a long time ago and I saw it when it came out and I fucking hated it, but I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, so now I get to complain about it with you all. We're still gonna do this, alright? Okay? Alright. My biggest problem with, but this isn't just a problem I have with Austin McConnell. This is not another whole ass beef I have. Oh, that looks terrible. Hold on. It makes me so angry. The problem isn't just my beef with this random ass guy named Austin McConnell. It's not the same. Okay, I have beef with this man, but this isn't one of those things of like why I have beef with this man. This is about the sci-fi as the world looks at it, because everyone is looking at it wrong. For instance, when I was little, and by little I mean 16, I would go to Barnes & Noble and pick out books. Because I read physical books, and then I switched to Kindle books, and now I'm switching back to physical books. If you guys want me to do a bookshelf tour, then I would do that. And it would be pretty fun, because I just rearranged it. But anyways, so, like, I'm here, just minding my own business in the Barnes and Noble, and I'm like, oh, I love sci-fi. I love science fiction. I want to buy some science fiction books. So I go to the YA science fiction section. Now, you might be wondering, Kendall, I didn't know they had a YA sci-fi section. They don't. That's what I learned that day. Not only do they not have a YA sci-fi section, they don't even have a YA sci-fi and fantasy and sci-fi section. Their only section is fantasy adventure. And so immediately I boycotted Barnes & Noble for like years. It is so bad lighting in here, so I can barely see what I'm doing. Hopefully my makeup goes well, but I'm just not sure. If it looks bad, don't tell me in the comments, because I have self-esteem issues. But, fuck. Anyways, I've always hated when sci-fi and fantasy get grouped together, because they're basically the same. They're not. They're totally different. Remember, like, a few minutes ago, I said, like, the differences between genre are more about the themes they create. That's a really good quote. I should put that on a t-shirt. Anyways, the reason fantasy is completely different than sci-fi, because it explores completely different themes. Like, yes, you can, but like when you're writing fantasy versus when you're writing sci-fi, there's two sides of the conversation that you can go into. One, you can say that it's two sides of the argument. One is in the future and one is in the past. That's actually not a full answer, but the difference is like fantasy is looking towards the past as a way to examine the present, and science fiction is looking at the future of technology and to examine humanity's morals. They're totally different. And the fact that every single time I walk now into a Barnes & Noble, now I understand there's not many YA sci-fis out there. I know that now, but when I was 16, I didn't know that, and they were not very helpful. Like, I was like, where's the YA sci-fi? And they're like, we don't have one. I was like, why? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, guys, hire better Barnes & Noble people. Like, my God. Editing Kendall back again. I just want to preface with some context. I applied for Barnes & Noble like once a year for like 3 years, and I never got in. And I genuinely believe that the people working at that Barnes & Noble wouldn't be better than me. Or maybe I'm just an insult to Barnes & Noble. You decide. But I applied a lot, and they clearly will hire anyone. That's why I'm so mad about this. And the worst part about loving science fiction is that everyone in academia is like, no, science fiction bad. It's terrible. It's like, it's so unintellectual. When actually, it's probably the most intellectual genre there is. Because literary fiction just like jerks off to itself too much for me, for my taste. Like, because think of books like Octavia Butler books. I've read all of her books except for Fledgling and the Parable series. And out of all of her books, which none of them, there's 2 series that I've read in full. One's 4 books, one's 3 books. And then several short story and all her short story collections. But they're all like they're interconnected, but they're not the same characters. They kind of like make cameos. Think like those romance books that like kind of like feature like a side character from the first book, but this time it was only mentioned. I read this book series in like the wrong way. I read it chronological order, so it totally ruined the experience, and it made me realize, oh, I need to reread this in the published version, because like I totally missed a lot of what the author was going for. Anyways, not the point. Anyways, my point is, you look at a book like out of all of Octavia Butler's books that I have read personally, if we're going off of the idea of the traditional science fiction and fantasy categories, if we're going off what everyone thinks they are, books like Wild Seed would not be in a science fiction shelf. They would be in fantasy, because it's more like fantasy in your fake definitions. Actually, that is not true at all. I'm gonna do a bold bright red. Hold on. The thing about Wild Seed is that the reason why Wild Seed is sci-fi, even though it has like a lot of the fake definition of fantasy, is because of the themes. That's why it's considered sci-fi. That's why it's on the freaking sci-fi sections, the sci-fi section shelf, if Barnes & Noble had one. But that's why it's classified as sci-fi, because it has the themes of sci-fi. It doesn't have themes of fantasy. And really, a book is only as good as its theme. And Wild Seed has great themes. That's why I liked it. It really makes you think, blah, blah, blah. But, like, that's my problem with all of these people saying, oh, like, Mary Shelley didn't write the first sci-fi. It was actually this random-ass guy. Stop taking away things from women. Women innovate so much better than men, and they are always taken away. And so I freaking hated Austin McConnell when he was like, oh, the first sci-fi story was this random guy named Lucian, and he wrote this travel log about going to space. What? Like a woman invented the first novel. A woman invented the first romance novel. A woman invented the first sci-fi novel. And a woman wrote the first superhero novel. The first sci-fi, the first romance, the first superhero, the first novel, the first Afrofuturism, everything. They did so much. And the fact that you were saying, this random ass guy that no one's ever heard of is saying he wrote the first sci-fi, you not only diminish the accomplishments of all of these amazing women, but also you're wrong because you don't understand what sci-fi is. Anyways, thank you for listening to my rant, and I hope you have a good day. All right, bye.